Campaigning comes to an end in Bangladesh, and on 12th, Bangladesh goes to the polls. But is it going to be a ballot without fear, a ballot that is open, and a ballot that is inclusive, that allows everybody to cast their opinion? Is it a free and fair ballot? That's a big question, because Hindu voters in Bangladesh are facing growing fear and intimidation as the country approaches its national election scheduled for the 12th of February, raising serious concerns about the safety of minorities and the integrity of the democratic process. In several districts, supporters of Islamist groups, particularly Jamaat-e-Islami, are reportedly issuing direct threats to Hindu residents, warning that those who refuse to support their candidates could face violence, social boycott, or even forced displacement. Hindu community members report being told explicitly not to vote for Hindu or other non-Muslim candidates, with some clerics and local leaders declaring that such support is religiously forbidden, deepening an atmosphere of coercion and fear. Since the removal of the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in 2024 and installation of an interim government, Bangladesh's political landscape has shifted dramatically. Jamaat-e-Islami, once sidelined from formal politics, has regained visibility and influence, prompting anxiety among religious minorities and human rights groups who warn that hardline rhetoric is becoming increasingly normalized during the campaign period. Now, there's been a disturbing rise in violence targeting Hindus in the months leading up to the elections. Hindus have been lynched, homes have been attacked and set ablaze, temples vandalized, and women assaulted. In the latest case, a Hindu rice merchant was lynched and looted in Mymensingh in Bangladesh, one of the areas where Hindus have been targeted very aggressively because it's a Jamaat stronghold. In some cases, families have reportedly fled their villages altogether as election day draws closer, fear translating into disengagement, disenfranchisement. Many Hindu voters now say they are considering staying home rather than risking their safety by going to polling stations. But this development has also raised eyebrows on the international stage. Donald Trump has now reduced the tariffs to Bangladesh to 19%, the same as Pakistan, 1% more than Bharat. But Trump had initially set a tariff rate of 37% on Bangladesh goods. He eventually reduced the tariff rate for Bangladesh products to 20% in August. Textile and garment production makes up for 80% of exports in Bangladesh. In fact, the new deal will allow for certain textile and apparel goods from Bangladesh to receive a zero reciprocal tariff rate. Now, with the US being accused of ousting the Sheikh Hasina regime, question remains, is the tariff reduction showing tacit support for Islamist forces in Bangladesh? Is the deep state allowing a free run for radicals, even as Bangladesh throws open all its sectors? It throws open all its sectors, even some of the protected sectors like dairy, beef, etc. They've just thrown open all their sectors for Americans to get in or America to get in. Asif bin Ali, Bangladesh journalist with us, Arun Anand with us. Namaste to you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. How do you read the current situation, Asif?
Well, so the country is heading towards an election. We are expecting that the election would be relatively violence-free, and we are also expecting that the election may contribute to relative stability that the country is right now waiting for. All the candidates, particularly two parties, so basically two major blocs are contesting in the election. Jamaat-Islami led Islamist bloc and BNP led centrist bloc are going to participate in the election. And most of the survey data that we have seen that has been produced in last 6 months, it seems that consistently BNP is heading the poll. However, it's also clear that Jamaat is going to give a very strong fight. Given the overall situation, from the government side, as you know that today government has published whatever they have done throughout the 1.5 year, and whatever the extra, they have also disclosed their amount of earning. So it's a kind of symbolic move towards a handover of power. So the country is waiting to hand over the power to a next democratically elected government.
But is it free and fair elections? Are minorities safe there, or is it just a ballot where perhaps nearly 20 to 30% of the population of Bangladesh stands disenfranchised?
Okay, so there is two concepts. One is participatory and the other one is inclusive. If you think in terms of participatory, and that definition stands for if all people can vote or not. So in terms of participatory, the election has the nature of participatory election. However, in terms of inclusivity, and if you define it that whether Awami League is allowed to participate in the election or not, then the election may not be considered inclusive as a standard, because Awami League has not been included as a contesting party party. So in terms of inclusivity, of course, there would be some questions. However, in terms of participation, there is no embargo on who can stand in the election and who can vote for the election. Now, it would also depend, you see, like to what percentage of people will come out and vote. Traditionally speaking, Bangladesh, in all its accepted elections, the average turnout rate is around 70 to 80%. So that's the average based on the accepted elections. Now, if in this election the turnout rate is to that standard, so it would be then considered in to some extent a participatory one. However, there is a likely chance that the Awami League voters are going to boycott the election. At least they called it, like the Awami League leadership, they have called for the boycott, like no vote, no vote. That's the slogan. But on the ground, so if you know whatever news we are getting on the ground, so local elections is also not about what the central leadership declares. It's also about the local power structure.
Yeah.
So there are examples of backup, the political relationship and business interest. So there would be like some Awami League voters, like the hardcore voters, they would may decide to boycott the election. However, there would be some who are more soft core and embedded within the local power structure. They may show up in the election. However, we are predicting, okay, regarding the minority vote. Look, I mean, day before yesterday, I wrote an opinion article in Prathamalo regarding my concern regarding the minority rights. But my concern is a bit different the way you are framed regarding the minority questions. So I am aware because historically speaking in Bangladesh after the election, always minorities have been targeted by whoever wins the party. This is a historical trend. This is not just this election. The same thing happened in 2001. The same thing happened in 2014 when Awami League was in power. And in 2001, the BNP was in power. So it's not different about Awami League and BNP. It's also about the local power structure that, oh, if you vote against me, I will see you. So there is that kind of intimidations. But what we are seeing, there is also a consistent pressure on the government that makes sure that nobody should get persecuted after the vote for voting. However, theoretically speaking, we can say many things, but then also the practice depends on to what extent government takes action in order to protect the minorities. But as I was saying, my framing of minority security and my understanding is a bit different from the way you are framing it. I am considering it so not about the minority, like Hindus and Buddhists and the Christians, even the Muslims with a different understanding, for like Sufis, for like, the people who do not want to support the Islamists, they may also face persecution depending on from where they are voting from.
That is also embedded because
there
there are those who are Razakars and those who are not. So those who want to go back to a pre-1970s Pakistan situation, drawing their allegiance with Maulana Maududi and the JEI in Pakistan, and that's one radical outfit. And there are those who believe otherwise. I totally buy that, Asif bin Ali. But the question, Arun Anand, is that India is in the neighborhood and India is watching. The Americans have come there, given them a trade deal, and many believe that it was the American deep state that was involved in the ouster of Sheikh Hasina. So what's going on here? And in the near future, do we see the Americans entrenching themselves a little more in Bangladesh, in this neighborhood?
I think there are three aspects to it. One is that a large number of mainstream Bangladesh politicians, though they themselves had to run away after the Yunus regime came there. They belong to Awami League and they had to escape. They are living in exile. So what kind of an election is this when a large number of political leaders, Awami League has been banned, one of the largest political parties, if not the largest political party, and they themselves do not feel safe. So how Hindus can feel safe in Bangladesh? Two, there is another important aspect which we need to take into account. There is a referendum also which is happening, and the Jamaat basically was opposing this referendum because they wanted to gather their strength and ensure basically, first they come to power and they then convert Bangladesh into a Sharia run country. So this referendum is a big bone of contention. The country, as far as I can observe and the sources which I have on the ground, Bangladesh politicians are vertically split over this thing, that whether this referendum should simultaneously have been held or not. So that is another part. And the third thing is that I think whichever party comes to power, probably BNP seems to be, as my fellow panelist said, seems to be having a lead. But let me tell you, the way situation is developing and the way Yunus regime has handled this whole situation, first they have denied, they are in a state of denial that anti-Hindu violence has happened there. So they have to accept that. Second thing is they are again in a state of denial that, of course, that participatory thing is there, but there is no meaning of being participatory if people cannot go out and vote in the elections. And third thing is that Hindus are not even allowed to basically, there's a lot of pressure on that. Even there are more than thousands of students whose degrees have been taken back, and student leaders who are not allowed to enter. They have been picked up from their dormitories. They have been put behind the bar. So this is, and the last thing is basically, I think Bangladesh has become new theater of the great game, and ultimately, whatever gains Bangladesh had achieved, the way things are moving ahead, I don't see. I think basically Bangladesh is heading towards a civil war. To use, basically not so harsh words.
Yeah, but civil war is also not good for this neighborhood, and that means that there will be a spillover, and that is going to affect Bharat too. The other thing, Arun Anand, is that are we watching, allow the things to play out? Does the BNP have the kind of muscle to be able to run the government without the Jamaat backing it? What happens to someone like Mohammad Yunus? Does he get away with all that he has done? These are all questions that remain. Or does he continue to enjoy power as perhaps president, being elevated with Tariq Rahman if the BNP win? Tariq Rahman, if the BNP wins?
See, I just have a couple of points to make. See, one is basically, that Yunus wants to stay. That's very clear. Basically, he doesn't want to hand over the power. One is that. Second is nobody, even Awami League, let me tell you, the way Jamaat Islami has expanded its base, it will be very difficult for any political party to run the government, because Jamaat has radicalized a large section of the society, not the complete Bangladeshi society, and they have backing of Pakistan. And we know the historic role of Jamaat Islami and its ideology. So they will be out on the streets. Then there are major players like Hizbut Tahrir, whose name even people don't take.
Yeah.
So they are playing a key role behind this to convert kind of Bangladesh into this thing. And India is in a very it's like between the rock and the wall. So India has very limited options, and of course I don't think that India will be sitting and just waiting if violence continues.
The larger question is, what happens to the moderate Bangladeshi? What happens to the moderate Bangladeshi who refuse to sign up to an Islamist agenda, Asif bin Ali? What happens to them? Where do they vote? Who do they vote for? Because Awami League is not there. There was never a strong opposition in place. Now there is BNP. Do they have the kind of organization and the spine and the ability to be able to keep Bangladesh on the center-left path that it has always been?
Before I move on to answer the question, I just want to add to information, was as my fellow panelist was saying, Jamaat is not opposing the referendum. Jamaat is supporting the referendum. And the second thing that my panelist has said regarding the invocation of some students' degree, and he associated it with the religious minority. So at least 4 fact-checking organizations, including AFP, they have mentioned that this is a fake news, have been produced over the time, and they haven't found any on-ground data to back up that accusations. However, moving towards your question, yes, the way you are thinking like Bangladesh is going and heading towards a civil war, I think that is over-exaggeration, because Bangladesh is a pretty much mature country. I do understand when you look at it from the conflict framework, when you look at it from okay, there is like Islamist, and then against this Islamist there is like the liberals. If you look from that framework, of course there is a huge tension, there is no doubt about it. But then you also need to understand that Bangladesh have been through difficult times, and in those difficult times the educated section of the society, as well as the overall the civilian, both like the conscious part and as well as the common one, they have shown a maturity, because the maturity is, when Sheikh Hasina fled on 5th August, Sheikh Hasina came to power as an elected government in 2008, and she has a huge mandate when she came to power. But by the time when she had to leave the power, she lost that mandate because
Right.
of like
Yeah, but if
unaccepted
she
election in
lost that
2014 and
mandate, then it
18.
should only be fair that she should fight the election, and then the voters should vote her out rather than she being banned out altogether and this entire framework being changed. I have run out of time, but we will take
I
this
agree with
conversation
you.
forward again on our Wednesday edition. But I've run out of time for the moment. Asif bin Ali and Arun Anand, thank you very much. Namaste, viewers.